In today's episode, I've chosen one Nintendo game from every year since 1985. Welcome to the video. A couple of things before we dive into it. One, I've decided to go with release dates from North America. Why? Because I just did. Actually, there's a reason for that, and it started with Super Mario Bros. On the NES, because that was released in 1985, and for some reason, that's the year it just sticks in my head. So that's why I chose the North American region. So please be mindful if you're in Europe or Japan. The games I've picked will be very different to yours. Please take that into account, that this is a subjective video for games that I hold dear to my gaming curriculum vitae, or resume if you're in the US. So I hope you enjoy this video. Without further ado, let's start with 1985, and it's no surprise that it's this. Super Mario Bros., the game that started it all. The underground, the overground, the castles, the pipes, absolutely everything about this game oozes charm as much as it does today. I'll never forget sat in my cousin's bedroom playing this for the first time. I didn't have an NES yet. I don't even think I had any kind of console or home computer at this time, but I thoroughly enjoyed my time spent with him. I was mesmerised by playing this game. It was incredibly tricky back then, but I still enjoy it today, and it's a powerful testament to the origin of video games as we know it today. 1986, if you're in North America, of course, was a golden year as you got to play Metroid and familiarise yourself with the adventures of Samus Aran for the very first time. Looking back now, I believe this game on the NES was way ahead of its time. The ability to shoot in different directions, gain different power-ups, morph, I mean, it was absolutely tremendous. A Nintendo classic, a masterpiece arguably, paving the game for many other fantastic Metroid games to come. Not only does that introduction give you goosebumps, but this scene right there also gives you goosebumps. Again, like Metroid, Zelda was way ahead of its time. It was a gorgeous way to introduce RPGs to the Western world in a beautiful top-down format, and of course paving the way for A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, which lends heavily from this formula. I can't say much for the second Zelda game because that was more of the horrific side-scrolling. Anyway, we'll park that. We're not talking about that. This game did a lot for me back in the day. I've always said that I've been hooked on top-down kind of artwork, top-down adventure games, and I think that's what initially drew me to this, but when I played it I realised actually there's a lot more lure to this with the enemies, the weapons, the different kind of, just everything, even the music. It was one of the first games that I really started to appreciate sound in a video game. So 1987, if you played this back on launch, I want to hear from you. Phew, we made it to the bottom. This is Super Mario Bros. 2, arguably a spin-off as it felt very different to the first game, of course, which we've covered in the 1985 section. Each of the different players from the Mario universe has a slightly different perk. My favourite was always Princess Peach. I liked that floating ability, which gave you that little bit of an edge when you're jumping and defying bosses. It was a fantastic experience, and I'm not going to lie, I played it first on Mario All-Stars, but then that led me to buying a copy on the NES, and I wasn't disappointed. Albeit with a slightly dulled down colour palette, this is still a very much enjoyable game. It's sad. It's so sad that not a lot of us talk about it fondly though, but let's talk about it fondly here. I absolutely loved this game, and it's a game that I'll be going back to play. Might even do a stream through on Super Mario All-Stars, because I just like that tighter, popping colour palette compared to the NES. But let me know what you think in the comment section. Aside from Tetris, Super Mario Land was one of the first games that we played on the Game Boy. In fact, Tetris and this were the two games my brother got with his pack at Christmas. This for me just took me right back to the NES days of Super Mario Brothers, and don't get me wrong, Super Mario Brothers on the NES was still fresh in my mind because we were still playing it, but I really liked the notion of being able to play that game that was very similar on the Game Boy. As much as I wasn't a huge handheld fan back in the day, these were great games to play when you weren't allowed the TV on at night and you wanted to play something in bed so you could hide under the covers and play your Game Boy, and for me, this game was that game. You're probably thinking there's a bit of a Mario theme going on here. Well, there actually is, clearly. But let's face it, the likes of Super Mario Bros. 3 and all of the Mario games that I've shown so far are absolutely incredible and arguably masterpieces that have again influenced the gaming world even by today's standards, which we'll see in the later games. I freaking loved this game. Being able to turn into Tanuki Mario and fly and just giving yourself that edge over the enemies, hitting up Toad in his little house across the map, which of course is top down. You know I'm a sucker for a top get down game. And speaking of games, we've got this memory mini game, which was also a ton of fun. So Mario Bros. 3, thank you for the memories. We are still not done from the Mario-esque kick. Now this was of course banging us right into the early 90s, and it was the first introduction of seeing Yoshi for the first time, and I immediately fell in love with this little dude. His little smile just really spoke to me, and then you hop along and realise wait a minute, you can actually eat the apples. Wow, this game again was one of those wow moments in my gaming credentials. I always struggled to complete it as a little girl, and struggled to complete it as a big girl as well, unless I'm using save states. Now feel free to of course roast me in the comment section, but I have completed it with save states and I absolutely adore it. And for me, I can go back to this and it's one of those games that you never get bored of, even though you know everywhere to go, everything to do. I never get bored of it. That's a great game. I need a few seconds of your time to tell you about channel memberships. If you guys want to become a channel member, click join from the main page or the second link in the description. There are 3 tiers, all with different perks for you if you want to become a team member. Thanks for your time. Let's continue with the video. I am always asked, Gemma, what is your favourite game? And I say it's this, Super Mario Kart. Not for its gameplay. Gameplay wise, I would say A Link to the Past, which doesn't feature in this list, believe it or not. But this for the nostalgia, this for the fun, this for the yearning to own my very own copy back in the day rather than having to go into my friends and see it there live. This for the balloon battle and the 2-player couch co-op. This for the skill, this for absolutely everything, and this, of course, for Mode 7. Everything about this game made me love the Super Nintendo as a whole a hell of a lot more. So I just can't fault this game and I play it all of the time. Already we are well into the years, climbing into the 90s, and we have seen a lot from the Super Mario Bros. Camp. But don't worry, that will diminish as we progress up until 2023. Whoa, Gemma is moving away from a Super Mario Bros. Game, but we're not moving far because Star Wing, or rather Star Fox, was another Nintendo IP and still is an incredible IP for the systems of Nintendo. Now, Star Wing was the first game to ever use a Super FX chip. It was developed by Argonaut Games in the early 90s, and Dylan Cuthbert, one of the key developers of the chip and this game, were behind it. And boy did it set the Super Nintendo apart from the likes of, say, the Sega Mega Drive, and it definitely helped the SNES to pull further and further away from the NES, making it one of the crowning consoles of the 90s. Star Wing, I didn't unfortunately get to play the Blockbuster competition, but I do own an original, fully original, not a copy, cartridge from the Blockbuster competition, which is really, really nice. I paid £200, but this next game I did play in the Blockbuster competition back in the 90s. Yep, Donkey Kong Country. Myself and my friend Matt sat and played this for hours in preparation to who was going to get the best score in the Blockbuster Game Kart competition. I wish mobile phones existed back then like they do today, because I'm sure we would have got some absolutely tremendous gameplay, pictures and just memories from the day. But I'll tell you this, Matt beat me by a couple of 100 points. Remember, I came second and my score was like 8,000 something, I don't know, but I was pretty happy with that. I think it was just to play through the first level and get the most points in an allotted time. Not to mention, my memories aside, I think there's no denying that there's lots of fans of this game. And again, it was another one of those pioneering games graphically and sound, and of course some of the original kind of first party Nintendo characters and the introduction of our beloved Diddy. Yoshi's Island was a gorgeous looking game back in the day, and we are baby Mario riding on the back of multiple Yoshis, Yoshi being our main protagonist, with gorgeous moves, being able to kind of fire eggs at enemies and jump and turn into random things. It is amazing. Into the Nintendo 64 era, and Pilotwings 64 is, I think, one of the better looking, less blocky games of that era. Produced by Shigeru Miyamoto, of course you can expect absolute quality. Now the jetpack has always been my favourite obstacle course, if you would. I'm not very good at the hang gliding, I was shocking at the aeroplane one, but I actually had an absolute barrel of fun trying my hardest to master the skills. I never actually managed that, but I was really good at jetpack. And if you've seen my OLL video where I teamed up with John Riggs, I got a perfect score on my run through the jetpack courses on the Super Nintendo. So buckle up guys, this is a gorgeous game to the Nintendo library. This is Pilotwings 64. I remember paying £18 for Diddy Kong Racing from John Shaw's second-hand shop in my old hometown of Alfreton. I was living with my grandma at the time and the N64 was rampant in my bedroom. I think this game gave Mario Kart a run for its money, what with a plethora of different characters, really nice vibrant worlds to just kind of drive through, different vehicles, and it was quite challenging in many ways. It still holds up by today's standards, and I will tell you this, I would love to see this re-released on the Nintendo Switch. We did get a re-release on the Nintendo DS, but imagine a gorgeous flipping remake with increased frame rates on the Switch. We need it, Nintendo. My goodness. Seeing these beautiful shots of Kokiri Forest for the first time, all of the different characters getting on with their lives as Navi flies around trying to find Link, eventually finding him and the adventure beginning. This game had me hooked from the minute I got in from school to the minute I fell asleep. I was so happy that I was working on a flower stall as a Saturday girl. I was 15 and I got a bonus at Christmas. It was £100. I ran straight to Woolworths after I finished my shift and I picked up a copy of this and Banjo-Kazooie. I left Woolworths with 2p change from my 100 and I don't regret a single minute of it. I'll never forget playing through this for the first time. Nothing, I don't think anything will compare. Going through this, seeing the graphics, learning how to adapt my playstyle to become less impulsive and actually think about what I'm doing. Graphically, this looked amazing. We had the introduction of many new characters, many new areas, you know, Navi, loads of really cool things. And I'm still in love with Ocarina of Time today, just as much as I was back in the late 90s. Yes! Pokemon Snap, I thought, took the series in a completely different direction. You basically just kind of on this rail, can't really deviate from the rail, but you have to take as many pictures of Pokemon as possible. It was really nice just to be able to be relaxed playing this game, and I always found it quite relaxing and quite fun, and there was an element of not trying to miss that opportunity, which kind of gave me that little bit of a dopamine hit. I think it was quite nice and innocent, and it really is cool today, and I think this is maybe a bit of foreshadowing for the kind of the pictorial-esque nature for Pokemon Go. Of course, you can take some nice snaps of the Pokemon you catch in Pokemon Go as well. So I think for the 64, this is a really nice title, and one that I think you need to play. Perfect Dark. I mean, of course, we're well into the rare years by this point. This is the spiritual successor of GoldenEye on the Nintendo 64. Graphically, it's a badillion times better, but the premise is the same. It's a first-person shooter. There's a health meter and lots of things to collect, and you just go around killing things. Does that sound fun? Well, if it does, you need to snag yourselves a copy of Perfect Dark. How gorgeous is that title screen? Well, it's not just a gorgeous title screen, this is a gorgeous game. It feels much like an updated version of Super Mario Kart on the Super Nintendo. For me, I've always dubbed this in my mind as the sequel. I wish they'd kind of sold it as the sequel. I actually think that they would have sold a hell of a lot more copies. A lot of the tracks feel and look the same, and I think that's why I certainly gravitated towards it. I always pick Yoshi, of course, fall in love, if I can get my words out, with Yoshi from the Super Mario World days. And this again is a game that does not tire on me, but I can assure you I've done my best to limit my use of Mario Kart games in this episode. It would be easy to mention every Mario Kart game, of course, that came out. I'm picking ones that I truly fell in love with, and this was definitely one of them. Four Swords Adventure was a game for me that really oozed charm from A Link to the Past. If it wasn't for A Link to the Past, I don't think I would have touched this game. It was purely because in the build-up, I was like, wait a minute, this is the it's not the Super Nintendo, Gemma, calm down. I had to reel myself in, but I was very excited going from that game and being so familiar with it to enjoying this game. Now, it's a much more cooperative approach. You have 4 links to control, of course, and you're meandering around this gorgeous top-down world that we all know and love from A Link to the Past. It is a Zelda dungeon crawler. I can't really say much more. Go carefully. Make sure you have your wits about you and you will do well. But I do think if you own a GameCube, this has to be a staple title. F-Zero GX helped to propel the GameCube into even more glory with beautiful cutscenes, fast racing, and a gnarly soundtrack, and of course, 4 players. I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, we need a new F-Zero game. I first played Pikmin 2 at the back end of my university years and was drawn to it by crazy colour palettes, and it kind of just was like, what is going on? And it was that question of what is going on that made me want to play it. It's a really nice little puzzle game where you control different Pikmin to just group together, work together to beat your objective. It's cute, it's sassy, and it just reminds me of a good time at the back end of my year 3 of university. Nintendogs, we're into the DS era. Having this dog was like having a Tamagotchi but in your Nintendo DS. Stroking him, cleaning him, feeding him, training him, checking in with this beautiful puppy, whichever one you decided to have, every single day was an absolute pleasure, and it still makes me smile today. Moving away from the top-down adventure Zelda games and honing in more on Twilight Princess. This I thought was going to be like Ocarina of Time, and going from that masterpiece into this, I was pleasantly surprised. The graphics look very similar. The characters, such as, your horse and getting to grips with Epona back on the Ocarina of Time days and being able to do it again all over here, felt really, really familiar. I don't have a massive amount to say about this game. I loved warping into the wolf. I loved just the different kind of versions of, Kakariko Village and the castle and just everything about it. It was a Zelda game that was fascinating from start to finish. Wii Fit and the balance board really revolutionised what the Nintendo Wii could do, and I really enjoyed the yoga moves when I played this, and we had one back in the day. It does go pretty cheaply if you do want to buy one today, and there's lots more fitness programs out there to do, but I do think this deserves a place in this video.
Mario time!
Now, using the Nintendo wheel on this really gave a Mario Kart experience the edge. I played this mainly as couch co-op, so it was nice for me to be into the later days of my Nintendo gaming back on the couch co-op goodness that I kind of grew up with essentially. This does feel fresh if you play it today. I played it recently and I was quite surprised at how well it's aged. It is a game that I think was inevitable on the Wii. As many of you know, there's always a strong Mario Kart game on all the consoles, and I'm hoping now that we can venture into Mario Kart 9 as gracefully as we ventured into Mario Kart Wii. One thing the Wii did really, really well was to bring people together. Playing this with many different sports you can battle with your friends felt like an absolute banger night to spend after a pizza and a couple of beers. I actually loved the tennis, and I'm partial to a good tennis game, but I think that kind of being able to swing your arm round and really get into the tennis vibe felt fantastic back then. This is Wii Sports Resort, and I think this is definitely one, now we've got Christmas coming up, that is a nice one to play with the family. Boy, did I freaking love Kirby's Epic Yarn. Kind of felt like this weird 2.5D kind of world. Whatever it was, I remember being freaking mesmerised by the graphics. And thankfully, by today's standard, you wouldn't think that it was released in whatever year it was released in. I would actually look at this and say, hey, I would believe that this was released in 2023. Now, there was something so mesmerising about blending in with the background and seeing the little Kirby bulge out and peeling things off certain parts of the environment. It's cute, it's fun, and I think Kirby is a character we definitely need more of. The bulk of my growing up was in the 90s, and the rivalry between Sonic and Mario and the SNES and the Mega Drive was incredible. So this was a genius game to release because you could enjoy both sides of the camp, the Nintendo camp and the Sega camp, and competing in the different events was just an absolute load of fun. I cannot stress enough how fun this game is to play. Not to mention, it just makes me smile from ear to ear with all of the different characters that I've grown up with. I've grown up with the likes of Donkey Kong and Sonic and Knuckles. It's just fan-freaking-tastic. This one I would class as a game that is old but gold. New Super Mario Bros. For me was the perfect blend of Super Mario Bros. On the NES and Super Mario Bros. 3. It didn't invent the wheel, and that's because it didn't need to. The side-scrolling Mario games really hold up well, and I've always preferred them over the 3D Mario games, which you'll note there's none I mention in this episode. Again, I grew up with Mario Brothers on the NES, Super NES, Mario Brothers 3, Mario Brothers 2, Mario World. So I think this is a really nice eclectic mixture of all those games, siphoning into my tasty nostalgia palette for Super Mario Brothers. We're cheating a bit here because the NES remix is a compilation of classic games, some that we have already discussed, others, like Donkey Kong, we haven't. So this brings everything, a culmination of all your classic arcade games and just kind of really cool platform games, all into one. I cheated, but it's still a cool game. Yes, I'm cheating again here because Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire are remakes of the Game Boy Advance versions of Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire. But for some strange reason, I missed them on the GBA, so I was actually super excited for these to come out on the kind of more modern consoles, more modern handhelds, because it gave me a chance to experience them with slightly better graphics. So that's why I've included them here. I remember going down to Eurogamer and seeing Splatoon for the very first time. Of course, this being a new IP back then. It is a giant paintball game, and we've since had Splatoon 2 and Splatoon 3. For what reason? I'm not sure, because they're pretty much, in fact they're the same games. You are a team of, I think, 4 or 5 characters, and you're battling against another team to cover the level in as much of your colour paint as possible. The team with the most coloured paint wins. It's a classic formula, it's gorgeous. Something you may not know about me, I freaking love Pokemon Go, and I've played the heck out of it. Okay, I've neglected it recently, but I was mega excited when this came out, and of course it's still one of the hottest mobile games by 2023 standards. Epic. Like many of you, I stood in line for the launch of the Nintendo Switch, that midnight opening when there used to be a thing, and I bagged myself a Switch, a copy of Bomberman and a copy of Breath of the Wild. And for all what it was worth absolutely everything, because the game itself really took the series in a more adult direction, I believe. I think there was this huge just open world, go what you want, do what you want, be the Link you want to be, and it was a formula that truly freaking worked. Octopath Traveler enabled you to choose from 8 different characters, all with very different stories, starting you at different points within this world, so replay value is very high. Now, this is a role-playing game that I am very familiar with, or rather this style of role-playing game that I'm very familiar with, but what actually drew me to this was the graphics. It is absolutely gorgeous. It's that kind of 2.5D, really nice, almost kind of hand-drawn, cel-shaded, you name it, the lighting, the textures, everything really looked nice, and I think it was, for me personally, the graphics that led me to playing this gorgeous game. Yoshi's Crafted Woolly World. Do I really need to explain why I like this game? It looks stunning, and it was almost like playing Yoshi's Island with the similar mechanics of being able to shoot the eggs, but in a different kind of 2.5 weird D anyway, some kind of direction that was not 2D. I think this game looks gorgeous, and I am again a sucker for Yoshi, so this game was a must. The hostile planet and tiny creatures are back in Pikmin 3 Deluxe. I'm not gonna lie, I wanted to emulate how I felt at university having played Pikmin 2, and this pretty much scratched that itch. Metroid Dread up next, and this did firmly take me back to playing Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo. I think the only thing that really drew me to this game was that I wanted to experience a brand new Metroid game on my Switch, and whilst this isn't my favourite Metroid, I certainly felt somewhat satisfied having a bash. Pokemon Arceus? Whatever. I'm sure it's open to interpretation. Now, I'm not going to sit here and beef this game up, I'm just going to simply say, I wanted to play this game. It's as simple as that. 2 + 2 = 4. I wanted to play it, I purchased it. Simple. To be fair, it is actually quite a decent game. I thoroughly enjoyed this, and weirdly my brother will never shut up talking about this game when I see him. So Scott, if you're watching, let us know what you like about it. And here we are in 2023. This arrived this morning. Super Mario Bros. Wonder, the brand new game that I have not yet played, but I am hugely excited to dive into a brand new side-scrolling world where I can be an elephant. That's right, an elephant. There's lots of good reviews about this, but I'm eager to hear what you think. So it started in 1985. Super Mario Bros. On the NES. Yes, we got it slightly later here in Europe, but I enjoy it today just as much as I enjoy it back then. It's just one of those games that is so timeless that you feel young when you play it, or at least I do. And then of course that paved the way for classics like Super Mario Bros. 3, 2, Super Mario World, and of course today with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. But that begs the question, what is to come in 2024? I don't have that answer, but I can tell you this. There's one thing I would like. I've said I wanted a new F-Zero game for quite some time. And okay, we got the F-Zero 99, which is a rehashing of F-Zero on the Super Nintendo, but I don't care for that. I want a brand new game, but I'm going to predict that F-Zero 99 is some foreshadowing that Nintendo do actually have, in fact, an F-Zero game boiling in Japan somewhere. So fingers crossed for that, and I digress slightly to bring up the Nintendo 64 Mini because of course I, like many of you at home, would also like to see an N64 Mini being able to play some of the classics I mentioned like Pilot Wings 64, Ocarina of Time, and lots more like Banjo-Kazooie, all on glorious HD original hardware from Nintendo. So fingers crossed for that, and I'm going to hand the reins over to you. I dare say you'll have more Pokemon in there, but I wasn't really into gaming much when Pokemon Yellow came out. That's why I haven't really honed in on the Pokemon Game Boy games, in case you are wondering. Thank you so much for watching. It would mean the world to me if you guys could subscribe, leave a like. If you're kind enough, give it a share. But for now, I bid you farewell. Goodbye. See you later. Au revoir. Auf Wiedersehen.